Hi, Ramesha ji.
Hi, Damvara. How are you?
Just great. Looking
It's
forward to
good to
talking
see
to
you.
you. Yep. Where were you raised? And brothers, sisters, family? Was it musical?
I have two siblings. I have an older brother and I have a younger sister. And I was born and grew up in Switzerland, Lugano, Switzerland,
Hmm.
which is the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. Switzerland has four national languages, and one of them is Italian, and the other are French, German, and then there's this Romansh, which is very a very small percentage of people speak it, and it's only in Switzerland. It's a really weird language. Anyway, so that's where I grew up. None of my family members is strictly a musician. I mean, they all like music, but nobody really pursued ever the music studies. When I was like 6, I wanted absolutely to play guitar. In fact, my mom gave me a toy guitar when I was about 5, and I just drove her mad playing all the time. I wasn't playing anything. It was just open strings, clang, 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 and every song sounded the same because. But one funny memory that I actually have, even though I was so young, is that my favorite singer at the time was supposed to come to my village to give a concert for the elderly people one day, and I was so excited, so I was looking forward to it. But then he decided to not come for some reason,
Aw.
and my mom told me, and she was afraid I was going to be terribly disappointed. And I said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll sing." And so I went to this gathering with all the people in the village, and the elderly people were there. And I went on stage with my toy guitar and I sang for like an hour and a half. And my mom couldn't stop me. I was just like, I sang and sang and sang. So that was my first performance ever.
That's
And
great.
the elderly people loved it, like they were so happy that somebody was doing something, it's just
Uh-huh.
like doing something different. So that was my first uh, performance. But then after that, I started playing guitar, and guitar was really my first music love. It was just like my friend. I had it always with me, and this went on for a few years. And, along with the music background, I started at age 7. I started to take yoga classes with my mom,
Hmm.
and she suffered from depression. And the only reason why I went with her is that she had anxiety attacks when she was driving alone, and so she asked me if I would go with her so that she could go to these yoga classes. But then it ended up being a great blessing because we became good friends with the teacher, and then one thing led to another, and I remember feeling at some point that I really had to learn to meditate, and I didn't even know exactly what that meant, but and my yoga teacher taught me a mantra that I could repeat and meditate with. And then when I was 13, I started to listen to classical music, and there was a lot of violins playing all the time, so I really wanted to play violin. And I started taking violin lessons. My violin teacher was a Kriyaban through SRF. And so one day I went to my violin lesson, and he came out of his bedroom, and I saw a picture of Yogananda on his altar. And I got so, I don't know, seeing that face, I started to ask him a lot of questions, and he didn't want to answer because he thought I was too young to understand, and he was very secretive about it.
Hmm.
But then next time I went to visit my yoga teacher, she had Autobiography of a Yogi on the shelf, and I recognized the face. So I borrowed the book and read it, and then I started to take the SRF lessons when I finished reading the book, basically. And so that got me started with meditation and all that. So the two things went very much together, because I was studying music and violin, and I was also meditating. So I was really not a cool kid. I was a really boring kid in normal standards. It's just like, can you think of anything less cool than meditating and playing violin when you're a teenager? I don't think so.
How was that for you? Were you happy?
I was very happy, but I didn't have a lot of people that I could relate to and who related to what I was doing. But I didn't feel I was, like isolated or anything
Right.
by any means. At some point when I was in high school, one of my friends actually was also interested in meditation. So he and I started to meditate together. He also became a Kriyaban. And then he found out about Ananda. So we went together and checked it out and we loved it. One of my most beautiful memories of first coming to Ananda was that I had already received all the four Kriya initiations through SRF,
Mhm.
but I had a lot of questions, and obviously, because you learn through paper.
Mhm.
And so in 1996, my friend and I flew to LA to go to the convocation. And I had all these questions, and so I arranged to have a private meeting with one of the monks. And I ended up talking to Brother Bhaktananda, whom I didn't know at that time. It was just like, but I don't know what it was. Maybe he was tired or something, but he was pretty rough with me. I had all these questions. My English wasn't as good. And he was very impatient and he just like, you know, oh, and so I came away with the same questions I had. And so when I first went to Ananda Sisi, I had a 2 hour meeting with Kirtani.
Mhm.
And I still remember that as, here's this angel woman who speaks my language because her Italian is very good. She answered all my questions and I just felt I was home. There
Wow.
was just like no question in my mind. It was so beautiful. And I was interested in singing in a rock band.
Mm.
Actually, I started with a heavy metal band, and that was in my early 20s. And because heavy metal singers, especially of that era, had a very, very high range, they were always singing super loud and very high notes, and I didn't have that. So I wanted to train my voice to be able to do that.
Ah,
So I actually ended up studying about 7 years with opera singer. She was a soprano in
ah.
Lugano, and she trained me. And then I did have the range, and I could sing those notes, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. Little did I know that what I was learning was going to be very important later on, not just for me, but also for the people I work with. Violin ended up actually becoming my main instrument. That's the one that I graduated at the conservatory with
Hmm.
when I was in my mid 20s. It took me a while to learn to play the violin. It's always been a love hate type of relationship. So much so that when I graduated, I had to put so much energy to get that diploma because I had to practice very hard music. And then after I graduated, I actually dropped the violin for like 9 years until I met my wife to be, Bhagavati,
Uh-huh.
in Assisi when she was living at Ananda Assisi. And when she found out that I played the violin, she wouldn't leave me alone. And she's like, "You have to play." I was like, "Okay." But she didn't know that I hadn't played for 9 years. So I was, rusty to say the least. And so she had me play Swamiji's string quartet, and she gave me the first violin part to play. That's not very easy for somebody who hasn't played for that long,
Mhm.
especially. So I was on a very interesting experience. Swamiji was there. He was living in Assisi at that time, and he was eager to hear his string quartet played for the first time
Ah,
by all devotee musicians. And so that's what we did. And it was funny because it, it was a little shaky. So one would get lost, but then find the place again, and then I would get lost, but then get back to it. So then by the fourth movement, at some point, we all got lost at the same time, and we stopped playing. And then we heard Swamiji ha 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 laughing. so that, so that was actually a really fun experience.
so who were the other musicians in that string quartet?
One was Dhruva. He's a longtime member. He's a cellist, professional cellist, really fine musician. One was Darshan,
Mhm.
whom you probably know, the other violin. And then there was a guy who had just joined Ananda a few months earlier. He's a professional violist. He was Italian. But then I was so happy I was done. I said, okay, this is great. So that was a Saturday. Sunday morning, after meditation, Shivani comes up to me. She says, Ramesha, Swamiji would like to see you and the other musicians because he would like to hear the string quartet during Sunday service. I'm like, what? So we ended up going to Swamiji's house to rehearse the quartet. Now, I didn't realize at the time what a blessing that was to go to Swami's house and practice with him. I was just so terrorized that I had to play the whole thing over again. And he said, "Oh no, let's just do just one movement." I said, "Okay." So we practiced one movement, and then he said, "Well, why don't we do the second too?" So I said, "Oh, what about the third? How about the fourth?" So long story short, we got to the temple and played the whole thing once again.
Yep.
But this time it all went well. And Swamiji was just like very pleased. And so that was my experience returning playing violin after all that time. And that kind of introduced me in a sense to more to Swamiji's music because I had been going to Ananda CC for as a guest for several years, but nobody knew I was a musician. And not because I wanted to keep it like a secret. It's just that I would just go as a guest to meditate, to learn, to spiritual things. I didn't think of going as a musician. But like I said, when I met Bhagavati, then she ruined everything. She just
He's your Shakti.
yeah, yeah. My cover was completely blown up.
What do you think you bring to the table?
I just recently started, well, before the pandemic started, to direct a little bit,
Hmm.
direct the choir, conduct the choir, um, and it was interesting because I feel like I have no idea what my hands are supposed to do, but I can hear things that people do with their voice, and I feel like I can really help with that.
Mhm.
And so that I think is something that I hope I'll be able soon to do more of, which is really bring out, but in a very supportive way. You don't want to just tell people, oh, you're flat, or oh, this is not good enough, or this or that, but to really bring it out in a way that people feel like they can do it. And as you know, working with the choir, sometimes it's not so easy in the sense that we're not working with musicians, we're working with devotees.
Mhm.
And so you have to use a different language. You can't just talk music, you have to talk heart and devotion.
Mhm.
So if I ask them to project their sound and do this and do that, I get only a little bit. But if I ask them to feel the joy and just, share it and to just give it all out, they understand that very well. And guess what? The voice responds too. And so it is really a way to work with them that is a little bit subtler. I've been teaching voice now for a little over 25 years.
Wow.
And so it's been, first in Switzerland and with different kinds of students. And then when I moved here in 2006, I started a job first at the church as I was doing data entry, and then I injured myself and I couldn't really work at the computer for a while, and so I started teaching. And in a short time, I realized I was making more money teaching than in my job, so I quit my job. I quit my job, and then I kept going. And quite honestly, this has been the the main way that Bhagavati and I can actually support ourselves
Yep.
living here because we don't have a full time job with the music. But then that has been such a great blessing because I realized that in coming to Ananda and singing this music, Swamiji's music is not particularly hard from a technical point of view, but still it requires a certain skill if you want to do it well. And I realized that having trained my voice allowed me to sing, but focusing only on the inspiration that I want to bring into the music because I didn't have to worry about whether my voice was going to do what I wanted.
Yeah.
I knew it would. And so, and that's pretty much what I've been trying to share with my students, and just to be able to really tap into the heart and just focus only on that, which is what everyone here, because like I said, we're all devotees, we're not musicians, but devotees. That's what everyone is interested in being able to do. But sometimes the voice gets in the way, and so you're so worried about, oh my God, will that
Sure.
note come out right? Learning to sing has very much to do, as you know, very much to do with muscle memory. There's nothing that you can see of what happens when you're singing. Everything happens internally.
Mhm.
And so the way you train people is to become aware of certain positions in the throat muscles and then ask them to reproduce what works from an auditory perspective.
Mhm.
And so working with yogis is very easy that way because in general, they are more aware of their body. So it's easy to say, oh, try to feel that, and they feel it. Sometimes people are not so aware or in touch with their body. So that's been very easy that way. Sometimes I've had students who show a particular aptitude as musicians. I can think of several of them over the years who are, they because most of them they just want to improve their singing to sing in choir, and and that's great. It's wonderful. They just want to be able to feel more comfortable as they're up there. But then you get some that you can tell from day one that, oh no, this is somebody who really has a musical skill, and so you train them, and then gradually you train them more and more as potential soloists. And so then the real fun begins because once they reach a certain technical level, then it's really fun to be talking more and more about, okay, so you're singing this line, and I want to hear, like, for example, Cloisters is a song that comes to mind, where it's, I want to hear that devotion, not just in the words you say, I want to hear it in your sound. Your sound has to reflect that. And so I encourage them to sing it over and over, to even record themselves, and then listen back and say, does that convince you? Is that, if you hear that, do you feel that um, yearning that the song is supposed to have? And sometimes I joke and say, if you were a divine mother, would you be convinced? Just, would you come? So anyway, that's a beautiful way to work with them because we both share a meaningful music. I don't have to worry about working with people who want to sing pop songs. We can very much dive deep, and it becomes more and more like a spiritual practice and less like vocal training.
Yeah.
And then there's no end to how deep you can go, as you well know. You can
Yeah.
sing one of Swami's songs for 10 lifetimes and you still haven't exhausted how deep you can go.
If people are interested in learning more about how to do that, how would they contact you?
So they can contact me, email me at info@vocalbliss.net. Divine Mother was really preparing me for what I do by having me learn guitar, violin, and voice.
Yes.
And all three became absolutely indispensable for what I do. And it's been very interesting to watch that.
Great. What would you say Ananda music is?
It can be many things, but strictly for us, for Ananda people, Ananda music is the the ray that our line of masters brought, the ray that Master brought and Swami brought, made into music. I see more and more how singing this music, playing this music, really helps me be in tune with everything that's going on around here at Ananda. It's just it's almost like a musical or auditory expression of the teachings. It's something that is obviously not as coded as reading something, but still the feeling, the vibration, the consciousness that it brings is very much what this is all about.
Hmm.
And we know this, we feel this as as Ananda devotees. But then there's a whole nother spectrum of benefits that anyone can feel, not just Ananda devotees. And it's the ability that this music has to just take your energy wherever you're at right now and lift it up. And this works for anybody who is the least bit receptive. I remember when we were in LA, we lived in LA for 3 years, and our job was to share the music. So we
Hmm.
would go around doing this. And one of the places where we shared it, because Swami kept pushing us to do that, so we found this cafe on Vine Street in Hollywood. They would have one night a week, they had open mic night. It was like 10-minute slots that people had to go up and do whatever they wanted. But we went up to sing uh, a few songs. One of them was There's Joy in the Heavens. And I remember feeling so utterly embarrassed. It's like, I cannot believe we're here, we're singing this happy music. It's just like, oh my God, this is LA for God's sakes. But that experience cured me of that because we went there for several weeks in a row. Every single night after we sang, there was at least one or two people, and those were people who, when you were looking at them while you were singing, they looked so like totally not interested and like this burly guys. And but they came up. I remember distinctly one of these burly guys coming up and saying, "Thank you. You guys brought so much joy to this place. This was so beautiful." You would never expect that.
Yeah.
And so that I think that experience was important for me to make me realize that everyone is receptive to this music. It's not just for Ananda people. I used to think that it was just that only Ananda people would get it and appreciate it, but it's not true. And every other place we went to the Skid Row to perform, and everywhere we went, people responded.
Hmm. You think of how much Swami wanted to get the music out.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember he wrote me an email at some point in LA during this time when he said that it's important to be able to give what people need right now because there's a lot of need. And he said, I've always felt that this will come more from the music than anything else.
What do you see in the future?
Well, right now the future is kind of nebulous, but one really amazing thing that has happened because of the pandemic is that we started to create these virtual choir videos,
Hmm.
and finally it's allowed us to have a way to involve everybody.
Yeah.
We've been trying for years to find ways to involve devotees from India and other places. Now we can have a choir as big as we like, with as many singers as we want, and everyone can sing. And even people who don't know the part, they can still sing melody. They can still be part of it, and that I think has a huge potential to really have a more of a musical connection
Yeah.
with everyone. So I think even when the pandemic will be over and we can get back together and sing as a choir, I think we will still keep some of that going because it's definitely a good thing. I even had the thought of creating a new oratorio recording like that.
Sure.
Have singers from everywhere sing their part. And the nice thing is you can edit anything that doesn't sound good. And if it really doesn't sound good, you can turn down that note and nobody will hear it.
Yeah. We'll get to see the happy faces singing.
Yeah, and everyone is welcome. That's the thing. Everyone, even people who don't live in a community, they're just part of a meditation group. They can still sing.
Yeah.
That couldn't have happened before. So that's encouraging.
If somebody was just walking in the door at Ananda Village, say, since that's where you are, and walked up to you and said, "So, Tell me more about how to get involved in this music, or what should I do from here, or what would you say?
Well, let's pretend the pandemic isn't happening.
Okay.
I would definitely invite them to choir, and I would invite them to listen to maybe Radio Nanda to just have a sense of what the music is about. I would invite them to a sing along that we do sometimes because those are really fun and they don't involve any rehearsal, any skill, and people just can just come and feel. And definitely tune into the music like Sunday service and things like that. Uh, it's funny though. I realize I've never had to do that. People just tune into it as soon as they get here.
Mm-hmm.
They go to any event and there's always music.
Well, thank you, Ramesha ji.
You're very welcome, Damvara. Thank you so much. This was fun.
You're welcome.